Greetings and welcome to Real Big Ten Football Talk Plus One with Chris. I am Chris, and this is Week 9 of the 2019 college football season, a true classic Big Ten versus New Age football type of game, with the 13th ranked Wisconsin Badgers going on the road to face the 3rd ranked Ohio State Buckeyes in the shoe in Columbus. And without further ado, let's get started today. But before we get started, let's discuss a little bit about why I named this episode what I did. Wisconsin represents what the Big Ten used to be: the ground and pound, physical, dominating the line of scrimmage, and winning the time of possession battle. Ohio State represents something that's new, well, relatively new in this grander scheme of things in college football, especially when it comes to the Big Ten. A spread option, RPO style of offense. And if those of you that don't know what RPO means, that is, of course, run, pass, option. Tell me that I'm wrong, and I'll tell you that watch the film is all I can say as far as Ohio State goes. They are a true RPO spread type of team. Last year was a little bit different. They had a lot more of a passing attack with some runs here and there, but this year they are truly a spread, mostly running team, but can still throw the ball pretty daggone effectively. Wisconsin, on the other hand, runs and runs a lot and runs some more with some ability to throw the ball, but as we saw last week against Illinois, Wisconsin does struggle when they have to throw the ball, when they can't establish a good running attack. Will that come back to bite them this week against Ohio State? I don't know the answer to that. Only Wisconsin does. But let's take a look and see how these two teams stack up statistically. But first, let's see how these teams have fared this year as far as whom they have played. For Wisconsin, since they are the road team, they did have an impressive opening day, so to speak. Crushed the Bulls of Southern Florida 49-0. Followed it up with an impressive home shutout to the Chippewas of Central Michigan 61-0. Then did crush the at that time 11th ranked Michigan Wolverines 35-14. Did squeak by Northwestern the week after, possibly a letdown game, 24-15, but a win is a win. Not an impressive one by a stretch of the imagination, considering how weak Northwestern has been this year. A tough, scrappy bunch, but not real strong on either side of the ball against good opponents. So, not a great victory, but Wisconsin did have back-to-back shutouts then against Kent State and Michigan State, 48-0 against the Golden Flashes, 38-0 against Sparty, both at home. So Wisconsin hasn't had too many true road tests. And of course, last weekend, lost a very close head-scratcher of a game in Champaign, 24-23 against the Fighting Illini of Illinois. Looking at Ohio State now, they did start out the year a little bit flat, I thought, defensively. I mean, 45 points is great, but did give up 21 points to Lane Kiffin's Owls of FAU, but then crushed Luke Fickell's Bearcats 42-0 in Columbus, followed it up with an impressive road victory against not a horrible Hoosier squad, 51-10. Did struggle to start the game against Miami the week after that at home, but did crush that team with 76 unanswered points after being down 5-0 in the first quarter to win 76-5. I have that in yellow because if Ohio State does what they did in the first part of that game against a team like Wisconsin, they might find themselves on the wrong side of something like that. So it's something to remember. And then followed up with an impressive road victory to Nebraska in Big Red Country at night, 48-7. Followed it up with a impressive home victory against the 25th ranked at the time Sparty of Michigan State, 34-10. Then this past weekend, hammered the Wildcats Northwestern on the road, 52-3. Big reason why that's significant. The last 2 years, Ohio State has struggled on the road, as a lot of people in the media have talked about, against substandard teams after they got a big victory the week before. We go back to 2018, when Ohio State got murdered by the Boilermakers of Purdue in West Lafayette, and then I think it was either a year or 2 years prior to that, got crushed by Iowa on the road. Both teams were, I think Iowa was maybe 5-4 in that game, and I believe Purdue had a losing record last year. Both head scratcher losses, but I think this year Ohio State has turned it around, and I think they're a much more complete, balanced, focused team, as the wins have shown. I mean, it's just an impressive team overall. But let's now talk about the last 5 meetings between these two teams. In 2017, the last time they played was in the Big Ten championship game, where Ohio State barely got by the 4th-ranked Wisconsin Badgers in that year, 27-21. In 2016, Ohio State beat Wisconsin barely in Camp Randall in overtime, 30-23, a classic game to be sure. 2014 crushed Wisconsin, and that was also a Big Ten championship game. We all remember that propelled them into the 4th-ranked spot and ultimately led to their national championship victory in the inaugural college football playoff season. In 2013 was another close victory by the Buckeyes at home that time, 31-24. And in 2012, another overtime victory for Ohio State. Both teams were unranked in that game, but Ohio State, of course, had the whole Jim Tressel scandal that year, so they had the postseason ban. Otherwise, they would have been ranked in that game, but neither team was. But a classic game regardless. I watched that game. It was a very, very competitive game throughout. Now let's look at last week's game with Wisconsin against Illinois, a look-past game or a telling sign of more serious problems for the Badgers. I'm not sure, but the stats are kind of head-scratching. You would think most teams would win by going 9 of 17 on 3rd down, 52.9%, 22 first downs, but a big, big problem for Wisconsin if they continue to struggle against teams that stack the box, because teams will. For their running attack, they only got 156 yards on the ground, but 264 through the air for Jack Cohn. 24-32 passing, not bad, actually pretty good, but had only 1 passing touchdown and 1 pick thrown. 420 yards of total offense isn't too bad, but for a team like Wisconsin, which is designed for the run, only 156 yards on the ground is very, very telling. If I'm a Wisconsin fan, I'm quite worried about that stat. The Badgers also committed 6 penalties for 60 yards and turned the ball over 3 times, but still held onto the ball for 40 minutes and 49 seconds. Wisconsin did most of what they wanted to do right in that game. They won the time of possession battle, won the 3rd down battle, but lost the turnover battle, and of course had far too many penalties. I've talked about this before in this show. Those teams that win the time of possession battle and the turnover battle and the 3rd down battle and don't commit too many penalties usually win those games. But if you lose in any one of those 3 categories, or 4 I should say, or 2 of them, you're probably not going to win. And it showed in this game, since Wisconsin did lose the turnover battle and committed too many penalties. But the Badgers defense did pretty well against Illinois, at least statistically speaking, only giving up 17 first downs, 20% on 3rd down, only 174 yards through the air, 9 of 21 passing, but couldn't force a single pick and gave up 2 touchdowns through the air, but did hold Illinois to only 141 yards on the ground for 315 total yards of offense. And the Illini did commit 4 penalties, but only for 15 yards. Badgers also only forced 1 turnover, and we already talked about winning the time possession battle. A head-scratcher of a game for sure as far as on paper goes, but like I said, the telling stat is turning the ball over 3 times. That can kill you, especially depending on when you turn that ball over. Moving forward, let's look at Ohio State's just eye-popping victory against Northwestern last weekend, considering Northwestern has been a pretty tough out for the big hitters of the Big Ten. You looked at how Wisconsin struggled against them, Penn State struggled against them, and Ohio State, I figured might have problems, but they ran over this Northwestern team. I apologize. Penn State may have not played Northwestern yet. I can't remember now. But Ohio State did get 22 first downs in that game, 57.1% on third down, 279 yards on the ground. Only 201 through the air, but when you're running the ball for 279 yards, you don't really need to pass all that much. But Ohio State was quite efficient when they did throw the ball. 19 of 26 passing, 4 touchdowns, 0 picks, 480 yards of total offense against a pretty good Northwestern defense. Did commit 5 penalties for 58 yards though. But 0 turnovers. Did lose the time of possession battle, which definitely I don't like seeing, but the way Ohio State runs offense, that's not really unheard of because Ohio State scores and scores quickly. For Northwestern, only 14 first downs, 27.7% on third down, 157 yards on the ground. Not great for Ohio State's defense, but not horrible either, considering only give up 42 yards through the air. Northwestern was 6 of 21 passing. No touchdowns, 2 picks thrown. Only 199 yards of offense. And committed 8 penalties for 76 yards. Ohio State forced 2 turnovers. So let's look. Ohio State won the turnover battle. Won the battle on the ground. Won the third down efficiency battle. Didn't commit very many penalties. Crushed Northwestern. Like I said, that's playing good, clean, sound football. Winning in those 4 categories. All 4, Ohio State dominated them. That strengthens my point, what I said before, where you win the turnover battle. You win the third down battle. Time of possession, again, not as big of a deal, but you still want to win that as well. In this case, we'll kind of say it's almost a non-factor because of the way Ohio State plays offense. Now, moving on, let's look at the tail of the tape for these 2 teams, starting with the offensive efficiency. Both teams pretty good offensively, except, well, actually, I shouldn't say both teams are pretty good. Ohio State is incredibly dominant offensively. Wisconsin, pretty good at 443.7 yards per game. That's 37th nationally. 52% on third down. That's very impressive for Wisconsin. That's 6th nationally. A +7 turnover margin. That's 10th. So Wisconsin does do a good job of holding onto the ball. But so does Ohio State. Ohio State 526.7 yards of offense per game. That's 5th best in the country. 56.1% on third down. That's best in the country. And a +9 turnover margin. That's 4th nationally. These are the reasons why Ohio State is winning all these games, folks. They convert on third down. They dominate on offense. And they don't beat themselves through committing too many turnovers. Moving on, let's look at each team defensively. And of course, as we would expect, both teams quite dominant defensively. Wisconsin only giving up 193.9 yards of offense per game. That's best in the country. What's also best in the country for Wisconsin, only giving up 16.1% of third down conversions. Wisconsin has also forced, actually both teams have forced 15 turnovers. That's 9th best in the country. Quite impressive for both teams. Ohio State right behind Wisconsin at 229 yards of offense given up. That's 2nd best in the country. Ohio State is 3rd best in the country at only giving up 25.9% of third down conversions to the opposition. Both teams are solid on both sides of the ball. There's no question about that, at least statistically. But like we saw with Wisconsin, they do struggle when they can't run the ball effectively. Let's look at the passing offensive splits. Both teams are efficient passing the ball, but they don't throw the ball all that much. Wisconsin is best in the country at 77% completion percentage, but only acquiring 208.3 passing yards per game. That's 89th nationally. Wisconsin's O-line does a good job of protecting Jack Coan when he throws the ball, only allowing 1.4 sacks per game. That's 31st nationally. And Coan hasn't thrown many picks, only has thrown 2 picks so far this year. For Ohio State, 8th best in the country as far as completion percentage goes at 70.8%. Ohio State does throw the ball a little bit more, 239.6 yards per game, that's 66th nationally. But Ohio State mainly, when they do throw the ball, they go for the home run strike, so that's something to remember for Wisconsin. And Ohio State has also allowed, I think, too many sacks, on average allowing 2 sacks per game, that's 63rd nationally. Got to be careful moving forward as Ohio State plays tougher and tougher defenses. That can be a problem, and that can get Justin Fields hurt if they're not careful. And speaking of Fields, he's only thrown 1 pick so far this year. Passing defense, again, both teams are quite solid on this side of the ball. Wisconsin has only allowed 43.75% of passes completed against them. That's best in the country. Wisconsin is also best at only allowing 135.4 yards to the air. 5th best in sacks at 3.7 sacks per game. Again, quite impressive. Wisconsin has gotten 8 interceptions this year. Ohio State, 10th best in the country, only allowing 51.79% of passes completed against them. And 2nd best as far as only allowing 136.3 yards per game through the air. Ohio State is 3rd best in 4 sacks per game and has gotten 10 interceptions. Both teams actually match up quite interestingly, I think. Not exactly great, but it's an interesting matchup, at least on paper. Of course, games aren't played on paper, but we'll continue. Looking at rushing, again, both teams are quite solid. Both teams control the line of scrimmage quite well on both offensively and defensively against and for the run. Wisconsin, 235.4 running yards per game. That is 17th best nationally. But Wisconsin is best at stopping the run, only allowing 58.4 yards per game. That's dominance. Ohio State, 3rd best in the country at running the ball, 287.1 yards per game. I almost have to remind myself, Ohio State's not a service academy. At 287.1 yards for a non-triple option type of offense, that's dominance right there, folks. That's dominance. And only allows 92.7 yards on the ground against them per game. That's 9th best in the country. Both teams, this is going to be one heck of a fight in the trenches. I'll say that much for you right now. Based on just what we're looking at here and seeing as how they played against their competition. I mean, Wisconsin didn't get crushed in the trenches against Illinois. Just committed too many turnovers. This is still a very strong team in the trenches. And so is Ohio State. Red zone efficiency, not great for either side. Wisconsin is better as far as scoring inside the 20 once they get there. Wisconsin is averaging 4.1 red zone attempts per game. That's 31st best in the country. Not too bad. Scoring 90.3% of the time inside the 20. That's 31st also nationally. And scoring touchdowns at 74.1% of the time. That's quite impressive. Ohio State, not quite as good as far as red zone attempts go, only 3.9 per game, but it's still 40th best in the country. But like we've talked about, Ohio State also scores in bunches by getting the home run type of plays. The big passes, the big runs, that sort of thing. So Ohio State doesn't need to really get inside the 20 much to still beat you. At 88.6% red zone scoring efficiency, that's also 39th best in the country. Not great, not horrible for Ohio State, but one telling stat that really surprised me was Ohio State's only scoring touchdowns 54.2% of the time inside the 20. Got to clean that up. Going against a team like Wisconsin that can move the butts, used to moving the ball incrementally down the field in 5 to 10 yard bursts, they are built to score touchdowns inside the 20. Ohio State, on the other hand, is not, and that could be a factor in this game. Now looking at red zone defense, both teams, again, dominant in this category. Wisconsin is only giving up on average one, I can't even believe this, one red zone attempt per game. That's, no team does that better in the country. Another team that does, another stat that Wisconsin does best is only allowing teams to score half the amount of times when they get inside the red zone. 50% red zone scoring efficiency for this defense. and only allowing touchdowns to be scored on them inside the 20 40% of the time. Ohio State, right behind them, only allowing 2 red zone attempts per game. That's 10th best in the country. And only allowing teams to score inside the 20 against them 56.3% of the time. That's 4th best. But one thing that I just still can't believe it is Ohio State only gives up touchdowns inside the 20 25% of the time. You have 4 opportunities to score a touchdown inside the 20 against a team, and you're only going to score a touchdown once. At least as far as this statistic goes. This is not really going to be a high-scoring affair, at least not on paper. But games are not played on paper. I know. But it is very fun, and I do think the stats can paint a story, especially when you give them some context. And you've seen who these two teams have played so far. I think the stats in this game, in this matchup, really do help us as far as trying to get a good gauge of just who these teams are and how these teams should compete against each other on Saturday. So, offensive scoring efficiency. Both teams do quite well at scoring. Wisconsin at 39.7 points per game, outscoring their opponents by an average of 32.1 points. That is 3rd best in the country. Wisconsin is 17th at scoring 9.3 points per first quarter played. In the 4th, Wisconsin struggles a bit at scoring only 7.9 points. That's 44th best in the country. Ohio State, 49.7 points on average. No one outscores their opponents by more than Ohio State at 41.7 points. That's scoring margin. Ohio State is outscoring their opponents by an average of 41.7 points. I don't think there's been a team since Steve Spurrier's Florida Gators that are that dominant, at least that I can remember. I may be wrong about that. Maybe you all can correct me. Maybe a Saban's Alabama team might have done better, but that's just staggering to me. In the first quarter, on average, Ohio State is scoring 10.4 points, that's 9th best in the country. In the 4th quarter, Ohio State definitely doesn't score much, but as a caveat to that, Ohio State also is up by so much. Normally in the 4th, they're playing their 2nd and 3rd stringers at that point, and of course you're not going to score much when your 2nd and 3rd string team is going up against an opponent's 1st string team. But 7.3 points scored in the 4th is 65th best nationally. I believe this Ohio State team is built to come back from a deficit if they find themselves in one, like they did against Miami. But a team like Wisconsin that controls the clock so well, if Ohio State finds themselves behind, it can be troublesome potentially if they can't get some yards when they're on offense. Now, points allowed splits. This also shows how dominant these two teams are, at least on paper. No one's allowing fewer points than Wisconsin this year overall at 7.6 points allowed per game. Also, no one does better than Wisconsin at allowing points in the first quarter at less than half of a point Wisconsin gives up in the first quarter on average. In the 4th quarter, Wisconsin does an excellent job at shutting the door, only allowing 4 points on average in the 4th. That's 15th best in the country. Ohio State right on Wisconsin's heels and only allowing 8 points per game. That's 2nd best in the country. In the first quarter, Ohio State is 5th best in the country, only allowing 1.6 points. In the money quarter, the 4th quarter, Ohio State is only allowing on average 2.1 points. That's 3rd best in the country. Like I said, there's no doubt about it. These two teams have a dominant defense. In fact, this game could come down to what team wants it more and what team makes the fewest mistakes. And shoot, who has the ball last, honestly, it could be. Self-imposed errors splits. Both teams do a good job at not shooting themselves in the foot, on average. Wisconsin is only committing 4.43 penalties per game. That's 7th best in the country. Penalty yards per game at only 42.71. Not too bad. Wisconsin has given up a few too many turnovers that in my opinion, based on as good of a team as they are. At 8 turnovers lost, that's 30th worst in the country. But of course, that Illinois game definitely added to that number, since they did commit 3. For Ohio State, committing 5.29 penalties per game, that's 21st best in the country. But I do think Ohio State leaves a few too many penalty yards on the field at 50.29 per game. That can come back to bite them, depending on what point of the game that they commit those penalties. You can ask Michigan about that when they played Penn State. So, total turnovers lost this year for Ohio State is 6th. That is 10th best in the country. Quite efficient at holding onto the ball are these Buckeyes. Neat little tidbits. These two teams played each other for the first time in 1913, so 106 years. Wisconsin won that matchup in Madison 12-0. 2 out of the last 5 Big Ten championship games were played between these two teams. Think about that stat. That shows the dominance these two teams have had in their respective divisions since the Big Ten went to the 2-division type of look, and I think it was 2014. Well, no. I think they went to the 2 divisions look in 2012 when Nebraska came into the league. But the Big Ten did, I guess you can say, realign their conference in 2014 when it went from, I think, the Leaders and the Legends divisions. Now it's East and West, which I think makes more sense. So, the road team has won the last 2 meetings in this matchup. Could be interesting for Wisconsin. Last time neither team was ranked in this game was in 2012. I just thought that was interesting. In Ohio State's postseason ban year, that was the Ohio State postseason ban year. That's why both teams weren't ranked. Like I said, in my opinion, Ohio State definitely would have been ranked in that game because they were undefeated going into that matchup. Ohio State has dominated this series at 59 wins, 18 losses, and 5 ties. I'd say the majority of those 18 wins that Wisconsin has gotten were probably in the Barry Alvarez era. Ohio State has won 6 straight in this series. Wisconsin's all-time win-loss tie record is 711 wins, 496 losses, and 53 ties. That ranks 34th all-time. Ohio State, 918 wins, 325 losses, and 53 ties, ranks 3rd best all-time. Something to wet your whistle about this game. Wisconsin had their heels against the wall against Illinois and could not develop balance on offense, as we've already talked about. Ohio State did not fall victim to a road game against a substandard opponent this time around. As we already mentioned, meaning Purdue last year and, of course, Iowa the year before that. Truly, Wisconsin represents the whole classic pound the ball and control the line of scrimmage mentality that the Big Ten used to represent in my youth. Ohio State represents the new age RPO in addition to a spread offense with the ability to run or pass versus controlling the clock through effective running. Wisconsin's average time of possession this year is 38 minutes. You tell me this team isn't a classical Big Ten type of team, and I'll tell you you're wrong. Or I'll tell you to go back in time and watch some Big Ten football from my youth in the 90s and even late 80s. That's why I say Wisconsin is as close as you can get to a classic Big Ten team. And this is going to be a very interesting game, I think. So, who to pick? I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. Wisconsin wins this game if you can control the clock like you have most of the year through an effective running attack. You have to establish that running attack first, though, to allow Jack Coan time to throw the pass when passes are appropriate. Jack Coan won't win the game for you without Taylor. Make sure the running game is effective. You can go back to your last week's loss against Illinois to prove my point. You have to control the line of scrimmage on D also by stuffing that running attack of the Buckeyes. Have to keep the Buckeyes running north and south through the tackles. Got to shut down the lateral sides of the... Got to shut down the outside running lanes. That's what I was trying to get at, Wisconsin. Cannot allow Ohio State to get the edge. If to apply steady pressure on Justin Fields while keeping him in the pocket. Like I already said, you can't give him the edge. He will beat you that way. You can ask Northwestern, Nebraska, Michigan State if you want to know about good defenses losing to Ohio State because they gave Ohio State the edges. You have to play disciplined Wisconsin, no momentum killing penalties. Again, like you did against Illinois. For Ohio State, you win if you shut down Jonathan Taylor and force Jack Coan to win the game. He won't do it by himself. Like I said, Illinois proved that won't happen against a talented defense. Was Illinois, I'm not saying had a talented defense, I'm saying Ohio State does. Jack Coan faced a decent defense last week and got beat badly statistically. Well, Ohio State will do him worse if he's relied upon to win the game. By himself, I should say. Also, you have to force Wisconsin to consistent 3rd and long since they also do well in converting on 3rd down on offense. Have to stay on the field on 3rd down offense by consistently gaining yards on 1st and 2nd down through effective running and short passes. You've done an excellent job at that thus far, Ohio State. You have to do it again in this game against a very stout, tough defense in Wisconsin. And of course, these short and intermediate passes and short and intermediate runs can set up the home run passes that you have done well at this year. And of course, you can always get a big run too. Dobbins has proven that time and time again. As has Master Teague when Dobbins hasn't been in the game. And you have to give Justin Fields the edge if Wisconsin rushes up the middle to disrupt the pocket. You have to be able to give Justin Fields a running lane if the play breaks down. Fields is excellent at making something out of nothing. So, now, who to pick? A tough game. A tough one to pick, but a fun one. A challenging game to pick, in my opinion. For me personally, anyway. Games aren't played on paper. We all know that. But I do think paper can help us paint the picture of how a game can go based on past trends and, of course, giving context to those stats, which whom the teams have played gives us that context that we can go off of when we're looking at the tail of the tape. It's at home for Ohio State. I see Ohio State winning this game 38-20. I think Ohio State shuts down Jonathan Taylor, forces Jack Coan to try to win the game with his arm. Won't do it. I think Ohio State will dig Wisconsin a deep hole early, as they have this whole year, especially in the second quarter. Wisconsin isn't built real well to come back from a deficit because of their running attack offense. Wisconsin doesn't get chunk plays. They move the ball incrementally. Ohio State gets chunk plays, and Ohio State, I do believe, will get chunk plays in this game. It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be Ohio State's toughest game this year, but of course we said that about Nebraska and Cincinnati and Michigan State, and they crushed all of them. Don't think Ohio State will crush this Wisconsin team, but I think the score may not even be this close, potentially, depending on how effective Ohio State can be as far as establishing a run game and protecting Justin Fields when he does pass. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe with your friends if you do love football, if you do love what I'm doing. Please hit the dislike button if you didn't like something I said, you don't like how I have stuttered or maybe misspoken. Please hit the dislike button. And if you would like to start a conversation, I would love that in the comments section below. I will reply to you. Please let me know how I'm doing, or how badly I'm doing, whatever the case may be. Again, thank you for watching, and you have a splendid rest of your day.